Okay, we should be streaming now. To anybody looking at the video, my apologies for that. Oh, I need to share on Discord as well. My computer blue screened, so we are back after a few minutes. So let's share the screen again. It should be there for you Discord folks. And I have to remember where the heck I was.
How's Boba Fett shooting somebody, right, with a blaster?
Yep, yes. Alright, so we lost our... Oh, yeah, okay. So we were in the test where, so if Chewie is hit, he can, in fact, be forfeit if he's hit. So we have ourselves these helper functions that are for passing all the weapon fire steps and sub-steps and destiny draw. And then so we double check and make sure that Chewie, in fact, has been hit. And then in this case, Boba's blaster can keep firing. So we just want to say no. We only need the one hit for us. Thank you. And so once again, we prepare our destiny. We prepared the destiny before for the weapon firing, but now there's also going to be destiny for drawing because of ability. So we want to make sure that is prepared. This is really important to do, like I was mentioning before, if you have a big, massive deck with lots of stuff that you've inserted in. I was pulling my hair out trying to figure out why some of these tests would work 90% of the time and then would fail randomly. And then finally I realized it was because I was drawing a Destiny 6 or something off of one of these other cards, but only occasionally. So do make sure to be careful with setting up your destinies anytime that they actually matter for the, or anytime that you do them, really. It is a habit that I would get into. So now we double check that Darkseid has in fact won the battle. There is in fact one attrition that needs to be paid because Darkseid did draw the one battle destiny, but then as far as I understand it, this is correct. You have Vader with the ability of power 6, right? Yep. And then Boba Fett 3, the Destiny 1, and the gun Destiny 1, all of that adds up to being the total damage on the one side versus Chewbacca's 6 power, so that leaves us with 5. So we should in fact have the 5 battle damage done. And then we just once again come back in here and double check that we are in a point where light side is being expected to pay for attrition and battle damage, and this time we ensure that Chewie has in fact been hit, and so Chewie is a legitimate card choice that can be used. And so then we go ahead and we follow through with that. So we check the life once again just to get a total life force remaining, and then we have the light side player pay for their battle damage using Chewbacca. And so when you look at this, all this is doing is saying choose the card and then pass all your responses. It's not actually doing a whole lot, but that's stuff that just adds friction to your particular test. And then because Chewie had enough forfeit to fulfill all of that, we shouldn't see any actual life force change for our total. But then, because we are dealing with Captive Fury by default moves that captive back to the escort once we're done. But because Chewie has been killed and put in the lost pile, this should not happen, right? So we're going to double check and make sure that the lost pile is where Chewie is. We make sure that Chewie has no escort, right? So we're going to assert that that's null. And then we're going to also make sure that Boba Fett has the ability to track which cards he's currently escorting. That number should be 0, because that should have all been cleared out automatically when Chewbacca was moved to the lost pile. And then now we should find ourselves outside the battle, right back into the battle phase. But now it is the dark side's player's turn to make battle actions. Now that light side has done all this, and on top of that, now that the battle is completed, we should see Captive Fury in the lost pile where it belongs. Okay, any questions? I think someone said they had something.
I guess I have a question, and this may go into methodology later, but suppose that down the road there's some bug reported with this card, and I don't know how to fix the bug, but I can write a test that fails under the expected conditions versus what actually happens. Is there a way to flag that as like a test that should be passed but it's failing, but you don't want to break the whole deployment and compile, you still want to roll this out knowing that there's a bug?
So in this case, that's where I would comment it out and say that, okay, we have
So
created a new test.
build the test, show that it fails, but then leave it commented.
Right. That's how I would do it. And then at least it's there, and you can push it up and merge it in, and then if someone else has some insight, they can take your test that you've already written and then use that to
Just
investigate.
uncomment it and continue from there.
Yep.
Got it.
Okay, so now just moving right along, we have Captive Fury. Captive cannot be relocated, and so this requires us to have a slightly different setup here on the table. Path. What the heck is path?
Path of least resistance is
Path of
interrupt
okay.
that lets you relocate a guy.
There we go. Yeah,
And
made perfect sense to me when I had the card in front of me, but since I don't actually have these cards memorized, I could not recall.
Yeah, and maybe this is why you chose Chasm Walkway as one of your default sites, because that way you were able to put a second Cloud City site, and Path works at Cloud City sites.
It did so happen. I believe that I did want to make sure that one was external and one was internal, or whatever, interior and exterior, so that way that was a very easy default decision.
What mattered is that they were both related Cloud City sites, and that Path only works at certain kinds of sites. So if they're both Cloud City, that lets you path between them.
Right. And yeah, so that is definitely why I chose Core Tunnel. If for whatever reason neither of the default sites could have been used, I would have had to provide both of those here. But so here, we're actually going to go through a process where we are going to just deploy the card normally. At the time that I wrote this test, I didn't have the cheat function that allowed me to just place locations on the table at the right parsec, at the right location, and all that. So I just decided to do it using game processes. So we cheat to put Boba Fett at the starting site and Chewie get captured by Boba, but then we skip to the light side deploy phase and then just deploy the core tunnel. So sometimes that may be necessary. It wouldn't be necessary anymore. I could just cheat it into the game, but at the time I did not have that. And then once we're done with that, we skip to the battle phase. We play it, and then this one's pretty simple. We just should not be able to play Path of Least Resistance, even though there is another site that is associated with Cloud City. Chewie is not a valid target for it. Okay. Captive Fury relocates the captive. I shouldn't have used the term relocate. Relocates the captive even if enclosed in vehicle. So rather than relocate, what I meant was that you go onto the light side part of the site. So it's not associated with the dark side, even if you're in an enclosed vehicle. So being in a vehicle should allow it to temporarily break out of the vehicle as a passenger. So we're going to set up a situation where we're going to use lift tube, which is an enclosed vehicle. So we're going to stick the lift tube and Boba Fett at the site. We're going to capture Boba Fett with Chewie, and then we're going to stick Boba Fett in the tube. And so we have here a helper function that allows us to board. And as you can see, there's a little bit more that had to go on here. Yeah, helper functions, that's what they're for. Then we're going to go ahead and skip to battle. We're going to, before we really get started, we're going to double check and make sure that Boba Fett is in fact a passenger of the tube. And then we're going to check the passenger capacity. As a captive, Chewbacca should still count against the passenger. So I noted here that the default capacity is 4, but because both Boba Fett and Chewbacca are on it, it's only got 2 remaining capacity. However, as soon as we play Captive Fury and we pick the site, pick Chewie and all that, we should find that Chewbacca is not a passenger. We should check and make sure that Chewbacca is in fact still at the location, and which would not be possible if he was a passenger, right? And then why don't I have this? We should be checking to make sure that this is 3. I don't know how I missed that. Now this is going to take a moment because the very first run of the day always takes a little bit longer, and now that my computer's crashed, I have to.
And so you're checking that only Boba is a passenger in the tube?
Yep, and notably that Chewbacca does not count against the passenger capacity. He's still technically a captive at the moment, but he's not being treated as one for most purposes. I'll just let that keep running while we go. But the because like I said, the very first run of the day always takes a moment for it to get everything cached and all that.
And as much as possible, I assume you're trying to test kind of before and after states without trying to assume too much about how it's implemented.
Yes, actually, and in fact, that does actually cut to a basic testing concept that I really should have brought up earlier. So when you are writing tests, there's kind of a mnemonic that the testers use, which is arrange, act, assert. Oh come on, where is my stuff that I had carefully prepared that all got ruined by the restarting my computer. So these three steps are really kind of what you're going to be doing as you make tests, right? You're going to arrange your scenario in such a way that it can be tested. You are then going to perform your legal actions in the context of the scenario, and then you are going to double check and make sure that that everything turned out the way that it should be. Now, it's often going to end up looking like this because I'm going to be double checking that my assumptions are correct before I actually pull the trigger, and then I'm going to just double check them right after. It also makes it really easy for me to have a bunch of these checks and then copy it and paste it down to after the actual action is performed. You'll also see that I'll often put pauses in between or line breaks here to kind of communicate the difference between, okay, we have acted, we have done our actions, now we're going to assert, and we're going to double check all these things, which we had tested up here before we pulled the trigger. Okay. Captive Fury ejects escort when relocated captive if no room in vehicle. So this was an edge case that I realized as I was writing this. When you put Chewbacca back on the vehicle, what happens if there is not actually capacity? And so this was a scenario that I had not anticipated going in. It was just something that became rather obvious while I was putting this together. That okay, you know, after the battle is all done, you're gonna end up back in the vehicle. So how does that work if a bunch of stormtroopers have gotten on in the meantime? So I go ahead and grab a few troopers. So because of the fact that our filler cards that we are including happen to be rebel troopers and stormtroopers, this makes them convenient when you need a bunch of characters on the table, but you don't actually need much of anything else. So there are some helper functions that I've included that allow you to grab individual filler cards, 1 through 10 or 1 through however many you define, and you can also grab a range of them. So in our case, we need 3 troopers, right? So we're going to grab a range of 3. And now we have ourselves over here an array of 3 troopers. So we're going to move Boba Fett and the tube to the site just like we did before. We're going to stick all 3 of those troopers at that same site. And then we're going to go through the same process that we did before, where we have Chewbacca and Chewie aboard Chewie and Boba Fett aboard the tube when battle begins. We take the we go through the process of executing the battle by playing Captive Fury, and then at the very end, we are going to go ahead and cheat, and we're gonna cram 3 of those troopers into the vehicle. I'm sure there are cards that might have been able to do this, but I decided to just cheat and get them in there. And then once we've done that, we should find ourselves in a situation where there is no additional passenger capacity. We have Boba Fett and the 3 troopers in that tube, and so once the game ends, once the battle ends, and we're at a point where the battle has no longer been performed, we need to find ourselves. We actually have to have a bunch of actions that kick off of this that automatically disembark Boba Fett, which I understand is a situation that occurs with Bring Him Before Me. If Vader happens to be a port vehicle and he automatically captures Luke, he has to automatically disembark. So we copied that same logic into the card itself. Yeah, it's actually one of these. Yeah, this big section right here is just handling that exact same circumstance of if there's not enough in the vehicle, then we boot them out. And so this is just checking to make sure and testing, skipping past all the disembarking events that occur. Probably an edge case, probably unnecessary, but hey, I wanted to be thorough.
It's very rare case, but glad to see it done. So you have a test. So just to confirm, you're asserting
So up here,
are you assert? So you're asserting. I'm sorry. So yeah, I'm just a little lost. So your goal is that Boba Fett disembarks and apprehends Chewie, right? Is that the goal?
right? So we have to give ourselves a situation where captive fury has been used, so the captive has exited the tube, but then when the battle ends and it's time for captive fury to put the captive back, the tube has already been filled to capacity, and so
right.
There's
yes.
not.
No, I got that.
Okay.
I got that.
Okay.
But then you're saying, okay, assert false is active battle. So you're saying, okay, the battle's over.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're asserting false that Chewie's attached to Boba. That seems backwards.
Let's see, where am I?
Right, the next line.
Sorry, which line number? Did you say the number?
460.
460. Okay, so
right.
Yes. So because this is in the middle of the process of automatically moving, there's going to be a disembark event, and so players have to pass. And so Chewie is not yet attached to Boba Fett because the disembarking.
Oh, you're like going through it in slow motion.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because the light side player still gets the ability to if they have interrupts that care about disembarking, then those events occur, and so we have to pass through them before the rest of the action can actually be executed. So yeah.
Okay. So you're asserting he's not attached. Then you're doing disembarking, and then you're asserting that he is once again attached.
Correct. Yeah. So yeah, right down here. So
actually,
now
where is that? Oh yeah.
So it's right here. So we know that he's been attached. We know that Boba Fett has been automatically removed as a passenger. That neither Chewie nor Boba are there, and that Boba Fett is at the location and Chewie is not because he's been attached to Boba Fett. So yeah, we just double check that all that stuff has happened because the automatic disembarking is what had to be added for this test case. Before it wasn't a concern. You just automatically went back into the tube.
Okay.
All right. Captive Fury does not trigger release. So this is a situation where, so here you can see you don't actually have to have your variables look the same. I have that Slave Leia, which is the Princess Leia Organa, I think, that automatically retrieves 5 force when she is released. And so we're just going, instead of using Chewie, we're going to use Leia here. And then we're going to get to the point where we are playing the Captive Fury. We target it on Leia. And then we ensure that we are at the point where battle has initiated, but we have not automatically moved any. We have not automatically retrieved any force. So actually, I had to. Okay, here. So actually, I had to set that up first because when you're retrieving force, you're taking it out of the lost pile and putting it into your used. I don't know where it goes.
Yep.
And so here we are going to get 6 of those filler cards, and we're going to move them all to the top of the light side lost pile, right? So we're stacking that pile up so that it has something in there. I put 6 because she's supposed to retrieve 5. So if her card text was activating, we should find that there's 1 left, right? And 5 having been put back into the used pile. But we find that is not the case. That at every point that we check here, the lost pile is still at a value of 6, even though the battle has initiated. So her text did not activate. So now we know that Captive Fury does not count as a release, which is one of those lines that was in the advanced rules. Captive Fury includes non-captives in battle if eligible. So that's just to make sure that other. So once again, there was a line in the AR that said that other people besides the Captive Fury are able to, or besides the Furious Captive, are able to engage in battle. So we just once again grab ourselves some filler. We're going to grab ourselves a Rebel Trooper, and we're going to stick him into the battle. Stick them at that same site, and then we're just going to. Whoops, what was that? And then we're just going to double check that in fact the that trooper and the stormtrooper that we add into the battle are marked as participating in the battle. And then just to go even further, we double check and make sure that the power includes those 2 individuals. So for all intents and purposes, they are involved in the battle. Captive Fury cannot be used on a captive that battled earlier this turn because that restriction was once again called out in the advanced rules, that you still cannot use this to make a captive battle twice. So first, we pull ourselves out a stormtrooper, and we're going to stick that on one site. We're actually going to deal with both starting locations because we have to have two different places going on, right? And so we are going to have a battle at the Cloud City, and we're going to have a battle at the Tatooine Marketplace between Chewie and Stormtrooper. So we're going to start that battle in the normal way. We're just going to skip right through it, pass through it as much as we can until the battle phase, until the battle has completed over there. And in fact, so that's actually been boiled down to just 2 calls here, skipping to the damage segment and then paying the battle damage from the reserve deck. So that was very quick, skipping past that battle with no actual additional caveats. And then we are just going to cheat, and we're going to stick Chewie over at the city. We're going to once again cheat and make Boba Fett capture Chewie, and then we are going to play Captive Fury, or attempt to play Captive Fury as we have been doing. We will double check and make sure that there's enough force to pay for the battle, that the Captive Fury is in fact in hand, but we will find that Captive Fury cannot be played because Chewbacca previously battled in this turn, and so he is not a valid battler. And there's no other presence at that site, so yeah. All right, Captive Fury, it cancels the battle automatically if the captive has no presence. So if, for instance, the captive was a droid, the droid does not by default provide any presence. And so we should find ourselves in a situation where if we use Fury and we use it to target 3PO, nevertheless, the battle automatically cancels before we are able to really do anything because it detects that there is no presence on the side of light side. Captive Fury does not automatically grant presence. It must already have that. Okay, and then we have the same thing on the other side, making sure that if the captor provides no presence, such as if they are IG-88, I think this is the one with the riot gun that does not himself, he can initiate battle, but he cannot start it, but he cannot count as offering presence for it. I don't remember.
He can't be battle. He can offensively battle, but not defensively.
There we go. Yeah. And so this is just the exact same situation. Instead of Boba Fett, we're going to use IG-88 on the other side, and we should find ourselves in that exact same circumstance after we have passed through the start of the battle, just the very beginning of the battle. It automatically self-cancels because one side does not have presence. Okay, and as we're going through these, I'm going through them at a faster clip because a lot of these concepts are repeated. So just let me know if we're going too fast or if you have any questions. So, okay. Captive Fury returns the captive to the captor after battle if they are both alive. So I think we may have touched on this a little bit before in a previous one, but this really just kind of encapsulates it. So we are once again going to have a battle. In this case, I don't remember why I used Vader instead of Chewie, but we're going to have the battle go on all the way to the very end, and then after the battle has concluded, right? Assert false to Darkseid won the battle. It is no longer true that there is an active battle, and so we should find ourselves with Chewie being treated as a captive and attached to Vader once more. So that is the way that it's supposed to end after it is completed, if they are both alive. However, if the captor, or sorry, if the escort, I probably should have said, is forfeit as part of the battle, so they would end up going to the lost pile, then that captive gets released. So we find ourselves in a situation where we need to have a actually, yeah, we just do the destiny draws, right? Because when both sides draw one destiny, then they have that attrition that they have to pay, and so we have them pay it in the form of Boba. So Boba Fett goes out, the battle is no longer active, and then we find that we should have a release decision that is being given, and so you choose Rally to put them at that location, and then we just double check that yes, in fact, Chewie ended up at that site, no longer a captive, and Boba Fett was in the lost pile. We then do some other tests for missing, checking to see, because the active rules, the AR specifically called out if the captor is lost or missing, then they automatically get freed. So we have that test case here as well. This was one of the circumstances where I ended up using the ad-hoc functionality because somebody, I think it was Echo Base Trooper, described to me a scenario involving the ice storm and a snow trooper and a rebel, Hoth rebel guy that actually Echo Base Trooper bearing the device that gives him immunity to ice storm, but then captives can't use devices, and so it was just a big complicated thing just to make someone missing. And I looked through every card that applies missing, and none of them were really useful or easy, right? Because they were all going to involve 5 or 6 cards, and I was just like, man, I just need to test this one thing. So we're going to use the ad hoc functionality, and we are just going to make missing occur. So we start off first with Active Fury, Chewie, and Boba Fett, just like we have in all the other circumstances. We capture Chewie with Boba, and then we are going to move ourselves all the way to the battle. We start up with Active Fury just like normal. We double check everything because this is a new way that I was doing stuff, so I wanted to be absolutely certain that all of my ducks are in a row as far as all the ways that the battle is currently unfolding. So now we're going to do this light side executes ad hoc effect. And so here I'm just going to define a go missing effect that is going to offer a decision, offer an action as one of the decisions that basically just says make boba go missing, right? And this is coding an effect in the same way that you would code it on the card, right? Is that you would have a go missing effect that gets instantiated. And so once we do this, we should find that there is a release that is automatically kicked off, because by making Boba Fett go missing, he no longer provides presence, and so the battle automatically cancels, just like we had before. And so now we should find ourselves in a situation where we are deciding what to do with that captive, with the light side deciding to release them to either make them escape or make them rally. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So yeah, you will find yourselves in some situations where there just aren't any cards that do what you need to do, and you can in fact just make them exist. So here I just invented a card. Well, not even a card. I just took the effect, right, and stapled it onto the game state and made it happen. I would not rely on that over much, though. Really, just I find it better to just use cards that exist. But sometimes
this is probably a higher level discussion. But how do you decide which of these tests belong with this particular card versus with a general mechanic where you want to, make sure that anybody holding a captive that goes missing, they get released automatically, that sort of thing.
So that
versus this specific card.
That is a really good question. The only reason that I did it here on this card was because the AR entry for Captive Fury specifically called out that circumstance.
And it's not bad to have it in both places, in theory.
Right. I honestly don't know. So if it does turn out that is how it's supposed to work most of the time anyway, then so we haven't gone over these yet, but I do in fact have some dedicated tests that are just for specific rules as opposed to specific cards. And so if you're trying to decide where to put it, it really just becomes a judgment call every time. My tiebreaker here was the fact that the AR entry for Captive Fury said this. So I was like, okay, well, that's about Captive Fury, right? It's not about captives captives in general. And if it's decided that it should also go in here, then I would just copy paste it and put it over there as well.
Got it.
But you may find yourself asking that same question in a circumstance, like for instance, if you have a bug that involves two cards, card A and card B, does the test go into card A or does the test go into card B? That's really just a judgment call. In that circumstance, I would not copy paste it on both because it's not actually testing two different things, right? My only real tiebreaker in that case is I usually bias towards the card that is already in play. So if card A is already in play and I play card B and it causes a problem, then I'm going to put that test on card B. But honestly, though, you just gotta pick one. Okay, so Captive Fury does not return the captive after battle if missing. So here we're going to do the exact same thing as we did in the last one, but instead of making Boba Fett go missing, we're going to make Chewie go missing, and we're just going to make sure that Chewie doesn't go missing and then immediately snap back like he's attached to a rubber band and get attached to Boba at the very end. So this is going to look exactly like the previous one, except at the very end, we're just going to be double checking and make sure that Chewie is in fact, there is no active battle, and where's my missing? There's Captain. I don't have a test here to make sure that Chewie's missing. I need that. Well, but at any rate, we know that he's not attached to Boba Fett, and that's the important part, right? That he did not get snapped back, even though the battle is over. He was not returned to his escort.
Yep.
And then here's another case that was called out by the AR. Captive Fury does not return the captive if they're captured by another captor. So here we're going to come in and we're going to have hidden weapons. We're going to use that as our method for capturing a captive mid-battle before it is taken over. So we're going to have both Boba Fett and Vader here. We're going to have Vader be the escort for Chewie. And then we're going to play through the battle all the way up until there is a reasonable point for us to play hidden weapons. So we're going to go ahead and prepare a battle destiny. So in this case, it's very particular which one we need to have, because hidden weapons only captures if you have a 2 or a 3 on the destiny. So we prepare that, we play the card, and then we just double check that Chewie is now captive. While he was on the table, he would not have counted, and he would not have, or would not have counted as an escorted captive, rather. And we make sure that... Oh, wait a minute. No, I'm sorry. This is before we've actually pulled the trigger. So we have played hidden weapons, but we have not yet selected who we're going to capture. So we are checking to make sure that Chewie is a captive, but he is Vader's captive, and that he is currently at the location, right? So we're in the battle. Captive Fury has let him get enraged, but he's on the table. So now we have hidden weapons target Chewie. We pass all the responses that occurs, and then we should end up with a situation where now Darkseid has to choose what do you do when you seize them? Do you send them to the used pile, or do you attach them? And so after we have chosen that, we now have to choose who's going to be escorted by. We're going to choose Boba Fett in this case to be sure that it was captured by someone different from the original escort, which was Vader. And now we should find that hidden weapons has now resolved. It is now going off the table and going into the pile. And so now that he's been recaptured, the battle should be canceled because he's no longer involved with the battle. But we also make sure that he does not revert to the custody of his previous captor, which normally is what Captive Fury would do. So that's actually this point where Captive Fury is going to leave the table, and we will double check and make sure that he is now captive by Boba and not Vader, where he started with. Make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, Captive Fury can choose multiple captives at the same site to battle, and so here we're going to set up a scenario that is very similar. We already have Chewie, Slave Leia, and 3PO that was used in other tests, so we just happen to use them again. And we're going to have both Boba Fett and Vader on the table, and we're going to have... So in this case, we're going to be checking that you can only do them all at the same location, right? So we are going to move Vader to the Tatooine marketplace, and we're going to have him take Leia captive. And then, because we're cheating, we don't actually have to care about the fact that there is only one limit, right? That you can only escort one person at a time. So we are going to attach both Chewie and 3PO to Boba Fett at another location. And then we're going to activate Lost Fury the same way that we have always done in all these tests. However, now we're going to find ourselves in a situation where which location we choose matters. So we should initially have a choice to either choose the Cloud City location or the Tatooine location. And then once we have chosen one, so we're going to choose the Cloud City location where 3PO and Chewie are at, and then we are going to be given an option to choose how many captives we want to choose. So we're going to take a look at the choice directly, and it's going to give us the maximum and minimum. So we're going to see that there is a maximum of 2, which is to say that Chewie and 3PO are valid options on Bespin, but Leia is not, because she's not at the same location that we have chosen to initiate battle at, right? And so now, after we choose both Chewie and 3PO, we should find that both Chewie and 3PO are participating in the battle. All right. Oh, and that Leia is not, obviously.
Yep.
We then have another situation where Captive Fury does not need to choose all captives at the same site. You do not have to choose all of them. So we're going to have copy-paste of the exact of the previous unit test, except instead of having them split across 2 different locations, we will have all 3 of them captive by Boba, and then we will, when we are able to choose 3 different captives, we are instead only going to choose Chewie and 3PO, once again leaving Leia out. And even though she is at that same location that it was activated at, because she was not selected as a target for the card, she does not participate in the battle. All right, and now we get into situations that are really the ramifications, right? Making sure that the changes that we have done to the battle are not making other cards break. So here we're going to check that Captive Fury still permits captive spotting effects to work during battle. So here we're going to use Dengar V, I believe, that still treats, we still want him to be treating Chewie as a captive for his game text, which I believe in his case is that you're able to draw 1 battle destiny if you can spot one, right? And so
yes.
we go through the battle, we double check and we make sure that the total power is 3, or I should have been checking ability, not power. Wait a minute. Oh, wait a minute. Hang on a second.
What did you have there?
I had
so
total
yeah, he
power.
did. He has 3 power. That's right.
Right, but I mean so when you're drawing Battle Destiny, that's based on you having 4 ability, right?
That is based on having 4 ability. Yes.
Okay, so this should actually have been. We want to make sure that Dengar's get ability get blueprint get. No, hang on. No, I need to say. We just want to get the ability of a particular card, and we want to say that Dengar's. Oops.
He has 2 ability.
He has 2 ability. Okay, so that's going to fail here when I run it. But either way, the important part is that he has less than 4, so that you don't automatically get that Battle Destiny normally.
Right.
Yeah, so I totally had a brain fart on that one. Okay, so that failed because I had 3 instead of 2. And then once this goes through, we should see that he's only got that 2 ability. Oh, right. So because epsilon, so because we are comparing 2 doubles or 2 floats, we do in fact need to include that epsilon parameter. Okay, and so then we get to a point where we should find ourselves, however, in spite of the fact that his ability is not enough for him to draw a Battle Destiny, it must be coming from his game text, right? And his game text only works if he's able to spot a captive, if he is escorting a captive, which is still true, even though Chewbacca is not currently attached to him. So that whole.
What is the line you're on right now where it's saying expected 0? What are you checking there?
The amount of destiny that the battle thinks that Darkseid has drawn so far. So it thinks that 0 has been drawn, and then we say, do you want to draw 1? And we say yes, and then we ensure that 3 has now been drawn. That's really just a way of checking that, yes, the battle destiny did in fact get drawn.
Okay.
Because we stacked the deck earlier. Right here, yeah, prepare destiny. So we prepared a 3 destiny, and it got drawn. That was perhaps too much detail. We didn't need to go that far, but I just wanted to ensure that, yes, the destiny was drawn, and there's no confusion about that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then Echo Base Trooper suggested Human Shield to double check. So Human Shield says something. The used ability allows you to, instead of hitting yourself, you get to hit the captive. So we put ourselves in a situation where, let's see. So we're pulling out Chewie, and we're giving a blaster to a trooper. Okay, yeah. So we're putting a trooper with a blaster in the battle. We'll have the regular old scenario with Chewie and the Captive Fury. We're going to have Vader in this case. I don't know why I chose Vader. And then we're going to put Human Shield in the Darkseid hand. So we're going to skip through the battle. We're going to play Captive Fury as always. And then we're going to get to the point where the light side is able to use the blaster. So they have the trooper shoot Vader. So we have them pick Vader right here. We skip past all those responses. And then at this point, we should have an about to be hit response. And so we have the Darkseid player legitimately use that interrupt of Human Shield. And so then we just check afterwards. We have him deflect it over, or use Chewie as a Human Shield. Even though he is in the battle, we are able to redirect it at him because he's still a captive, still an escorted captive. And so now we should just double check after all of that Vader in fact is not hit, but Chewie is.
Yep.
All right, and then Human Shield has another functionality on the lost portion of it, where you can use where you can forfeit captives for their forfeit value. And so we find ourselves in a similar situation where we just need to set up the battle, and then in this case, because everyone has enough ability, we have the regular battle destinies going on. So we're gonna have that attrition from the battle destinies. So we make our way to the actual battle damage. We since both sides drew, both sides have something that they need to pay. So we have the dark side able. Oh, sorry. You play the Lost Interrupt of Human Shield, and that gives. So we now have the ability for Darkseid to choose Chewie as the battle damage that is being paid. And that's that for that one. And then just for double checking, we make sure that Chewie in fact did end up in the lost pile and did not rebound back onto Boba Fett because of the ending portion of Captive Fury.
Mm-hmm.
Then we have Captive Fury cannot target a frozen captive. So this is just straight, plain and simple. We're going to have the same setup as before, as all these other tests, except we're going to freeze Chewie first, and then we'll find that we cannot play it. Not allowed to play it because frozen captives can't do nothing. And then we finally get to the used portion of the ability. That was pretty much all of the tests that we had for the lost portion, but then we have this used portion. Canceled force drain bonuses from ITO this turn. So when I dug into this, I realized that, okay, I'm going to need some tests for ITO. So I went and did that. I set up another class here for us to check ITO. And then it occurred to me while I was testing ITO's text, which just says that when you're at the detention block quarter, you add X to your force drains here, where X is the number of captives here. For me to test that X was being added properly, I was going to need regular basic force drain tests. And so that's where I added in this section where it's just called rules. I added a section for force drain, and we just set up some very basic force drains. All of these here are locations, which are going to have different amounts of lightsaber icons. And so I wanted to test all the different things that I could think of that had to do with force drains. I'm sure that it's not nearly as in-depth as it needs to be. But so for each side, it will check that the dark side can force drain for 0 with 0 light side icons, 1 for 1 light side icon, 2 for 2 light side icons, and then the reverse, that light side can do the same with dark side. And then we also do some very basic checks of dark side cannot initiate the force drain if light side is occupying it, and vice versa. So if you have both a stormtrooper and a trooper on one area, then the light side is not able to initiate that drain. And then also something very similar to the battle thing, where if you have one person that participates in a drain at one location, they are ineligible for participating in a drain at another location, and in fact it blocks the drain entirely. So I put in a test for that using Hellrot in this case to automatically move the the stormtrooper from one location to another. But so now that I had a baseline, now that I was pretty certain that, okay, force drains work the way that they are supposed to work, now we can hop back over to ITO and we can just do a really basic check. I didn't even test all of the game text on ITO, just the one that we cared about specifically for the force drain addition. So we don't even care about the restraining bolt immunity. It could be added, but I didn't care. So we just did a very basic test where we added a bunch of captives. And then I set up a situation where there should have been no force drains, because at that particular location, light side has 0 lightsaber icons. And so with one each of these captive Chewie, Leia, and 3PO, we have now set up that there was in fact 3 force that was drained. So now that we're in a circumstance where we are sure that ITO works the way it's supposed to, now we're going to have this same situation, but with Captive Fury, and we're going to utilize the used portion of it to cancel that 3 bonus force drain that you would have normally gotten. So this test is going to look exactly like the one for ITO, except we are going to... So we're going to have dark side start to do the force drain, and then...
I think you would have played Captive Fury first. It's
yes.
not a response.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, in the control phase... Let's see. Where did I play it?
Play used it.
Okay, here it is. Here it is. Yeah. So activate has been done. Control. No, we're in the activate phase actually.
Yep.
Yeah.
That would be the time for light to play it. If they wait till the control phase, dark's going to drain them
first.
So.
Yeah. So during that control phase, light side plays Fury, and we should find ourselves in a situation where there's no icons on the light side, and when they attempt to drain, there's only a grand total of 0 that is done instead of the +3 bonus that ITO would have normally done.
Because it's not a response to a force drain. It's
correct.
Used action top level.
Yep.
Yes.
And then just to double check and make sure that it lasts until the end of the turn. After that has been performed, we then just skip to the light side turn, skip to the dark side turn, and then just go all the way to the control phase. And then we find that with no active Fury currently affecting the game, you do in fact have that bonus restored. And so that's a good way of checking for until end of turn effects. You just skip to the next turn and see if it still works. Okay, and then one of the things that we ran into while we were testing, after I'd finally gotten all this over and I handed over to Gergall, he ran some tests and was running into some issues that turned out to be because of reverting. The way that I had coded it was not working properly with revert. And so I ended up adding functionality to the test rig to be able to handle reverts, which I imagine is something that comes up with some frequency. So this may be useful for those sorts of bugs. So we're going to set up a bog standard setup with Captive Fury. We're going to play through the entire battle, and then we're going to be issuing a revert. And so this particular text I had to get by doing a breakpoint and looking, and actually I had to, let me see, what was it? Request revert. So issue revert does all the bits of it that where the one side requests it and then the other side has to allow it, and then the player has to pick which particular phase they're going to go to, all that stuff. All that is handled here. But you could instead just request the revert, which is what kicks it over to your opponent to say, yes, I'm going to approve of this, no, I'm not going to. And so in the first version of this test, I just did that, where I requested the revert without going through the whole process, just so I could look and inspect in the debugger what text was being offered, and so I could pick one of those options that looked right and then deleted it and replaced it with the full version that has the proper text. I imagine that this may be more familiar to you all that have, in fact, played the game, played on Gemp, played with reverts, so you know what this is supposed to look like, but I did not. So, okay, so one of the things that it makes things complicated with reverts, it turns out that the way that reverts work is that you are actually pretty much deleting the game state and recreating it, or reusing a snapshot from an old version. So all these versions of the cards that we have been pulling are now referring to a version of the game state that no longer exists. So for our test to really work, we have to refresh all of these references. And so I've added some helper functions for us to do that. So now you can just go through this process of saying, okay, I want you to find the version of this particular card that exists in this parallel universe that we are in, where we have reverted. And so after I've refreshed all the versions of our cards, I then go through the entire process again of playing Captive Fury, and we just make sure that everything works properly, because the particular bug that we were running into was that after you reverted, when you got to the end of the phase, it would attempt to attach Chewbacca to a version of Boba Fett that doesn't exist, because it was the old timeline, right? And so it would end up just kind of disappearing off the table. And so now we just double check and make sure that everything is in the place that we expect it to be. All right, Captive Fury modifiers on the Captive are active during the battle. So some characters, like this particular version of Chewie, I believe, makes himself power +1 while Hana's at the site. And so we just go in and double check that this was another bug that was identified, that the game text was not active. So we're gonna have another bog standard situation where we have Chewie, but then we also have Han there at the location, which should make Chewie power +1. And so we go through, we play Captive Fury, and then we just double check our numbers down here at the end. That Chewie's oh, right. So Boba Fett also grants +5 to the forfeit. So we just wanted to make sure that was also affecting him. So I double checked both of those. And then Captive Fury abilities on the Captive are active during the battle if they were relevant to the battle. So I went and found Rook, the Rogue One guy. He's got a once per game ability that allows you to pull something out of the deck, I believe. Something like that. But I just wanted to double check and make sure that so most of the time when he's a captive, you cannot use his ability, but after you have used Captive Fury, he's in the battle, and now you can use it. So.
Yep.
Okay. I had a question about the revert stuff.
Sure.
Does it make sense in some tests to set up some complicated scenario, run one decision tree, revert back, do another decision tree, revert back, do a third decision tree, and basically avoid copy pasting a big chunk of setup code?
So that is actually the way that Gergall himself tests when doing all the stuff manually. My only concern with that is communicating to the people that come after what you're doing. because when we run these tests, right, it's going to be giving us a big old readout of all these 30 tests, and we know when one fails why exactly it's failing. If you have 3 different scenarios being tested in a single unit test and it fails, how do you know which part of it is failing?
Right.
And so splitting it out is a little more work, and does introduce the possibility of, your copy paste errors. If you copy paste something that was wrong 3 different times, then you end up having to fix it 3 different ways. Honestly, one of the weaknesses of this particular setup, and it's I fully lay it at Java's feet because C# can handle this just fine, is if you wanted to have that shared functionality, if we wanted to say, okay, everything in this section is happening in so many different tests that I just want to put this into a function and call it, you could do that. But it's this part that would get finicky, actually retrieving all those individual cards that were part of that scenario, right? And so for that reason, I myself don't usually follow a situation where I have, in addition to getting the scenario, where I have like a setup function that also goes through some pre-setup automatically for me, because I find that your individual circumstances are going to change based on which cards you care about for this particular test, and there's no good way for me to run a function and return 4 or 5 cards or whatever.
Honestly, like 99% of the cards are going to have way simpler test cases than this anyway.
Oh yeah, this one was definitely a doozy. I mean, there's a reason, I think a very good reason, why this one was not implemented yet. And in fact, let me just describe that a little bit. So the very first version of this card that I set up, I was just trying to get a lost or used interrupt that would allow you to play it during the battle phase, and that would detach Chewie from Boba Fett. That was all that it was going to do. And when I first set it up, I had some of these tests running, and I was able to get it to run to the beginning of the battle. I was ecstatic when I saw that yes, it did in fact have the I could play the card, and then I went and played the card, and nothing happened. Like, it immediately returned to hand, and nothing changed on the table. And I was kind of like, okay, what the hell's going on? And when I dug into it, it eventually became a thing about I figured out that the filters here by default do not include captives. And so I found that, okay, when I'm targeting a card, by default I can't target a captive because captives are not supposed to be in play. So I had to go in and I had to change one of the lines of code in here, and then I went back and reran the test, and then the same thing was happening. And it turned out that there was a chain of like 3 or 4 places that I had to fix that before I could even run the test once, really. And I guess what I'm trying to say is that exact development process would have been done manually before, where you kind of code it up and you think you got it right, and so now you deploy it, you put it up on Gemp, you start the table, you make your deck, or I guess you do those in reverse, and then you play through the game, and then you finally get to the point where you play, and then if nothing happens, that's just so demoralizing. Like, I had to go through this 5-minute process just to check and see if my code was working, and then for there to be 4 or 5 things that were getting in the way of that card before you could even actually play it. Yeah, no, this one's just way more complex than most cards are. Way more moving parts, things that have to be checked and fixed. So.
And the way you found that was going through the debug function.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, I would just get to one of these places where right here, you play the lost interrupt. That's where I would break in, and then I would over here we have the targeting, right? And so like if I'm caring about how the targeting is getting resolved, I could stick my breakpoint right there. That's not a lot of code right there, and see what happens after you target that particular card. When I was debugging all the stuff at the end of releasing or reattaching the captives, like I ended up putting these in separate functions just to make it more clear, so I can come over here and at that very end of the process, how do we handle this? What goes on?
Yeah, if you're considering making this a recurring thing, I would love to learn more about the debug function.
Well, we're actually so. It's funny you say that, because my third item of business that I wanted to go over was some live coding, where we are going to actually pick a card and we're going to write some tests. And I'm going to show you guys this process beginning to end.
I was wondering if we should hold off on that. One, because it's been 2.5 hours, but second, like, now I think I'm at a point where it might make more sense for me to get to play with this. Like, we get this to live, and I try it out, and then we can come back and have a lot of questions. That's my thought, just based on the amount of time, and also I think now I've seen enough that I could try this.
Mm-hmm. It's up to you guys. I'm totally okay with doing another session another time, and I could go through it that start to finish process then. We could do this one real quick now and do another one another time, just so that you could see both sides. What are the people here on the call thinking?
Well, I know for me, my family probably wants to see me again today. But I mean, this has been fantastic because I'm kind of at the same point as Gergall is, which is how do you establish the criteria? The tests are basically either you're asserting a positive or you're asserting a negative scenario has occurred based upon the scenario you've given. I think for me, I want to absorb and let my brain process that before moving on to debugging and actually looking at each of the code elements that contributes to whether your scenario has failed.
Makes sense. Yeah, I'm all for doing another one of these sessions, maybe this weekend or next weekend. I mean, and we can just sit down again and we'll just go through the process. And after you guys have poked at it a little bit, you'll have more informed questions, I suppose.
I think we can probably get you have pull requests up, so I think we can probably get them into the live system this week.
Yep.
And then we'll see if we've had sufficient time to kind of play around with it. Might need a little more time than one week to try it out, but we'll see.
Yeah, I'm down for whatever.
I had a question. I guess is this an opportunity for technical coders to, I guess, contribute a scenario to test some functionality? So maybe a player with a lot of knowledge of the game, but
that is actually a very good
coding.
Yeah, that is actually a very good place that somebody who has a lot of game knowledge but no technical stuff, I think using the document you put together, for instance, that would be a very good place for them to write out all the different scenarios that they're thinking of. Now, there's still probably going to have to be some translation there, because I imagine they're going to be thinking, oh, well, for me to get to this scenario, I have to include these 5 cards and these pullers and this, that, and the other thing. And so you'll still have to translate that a little bit and say, well, okay, we can cheat this. We don't actually need all those helpers. But
even a pseudocode that says test this corner case with this obscure interaction, that could be a huge help.
Exactly. And in fact, Gergall was actually just giving me he was just talking about it before we had this. There was a scenario that he wanted to go over just for some basic cannot battle twice rule. So he described a couple of scenarios. This sort of thing would be very, very easy to translate into a test, and it would be a very excellent way for a non-technical person to contribute, I think, to the effort. Because then that would reduce the amount of time that you're staring at the screen trying to figure out, well, what cards, what do I need to do? What's the total surface area that I need to attack?
I was thinking like the Dagobah rules as a game mechanic. It's somebody that's really knowledgeable with the game could probably put together 5 or 10 specific targeted tests that would exercise all the relevant functionality without needing to know a lot of in-depth code implementation.
Right, and then somebody who is technical could then take one of those and make a function for each one of those test cases, and you're off to the races. Any other questions before we wrap up the stream?
Thanks so much for doing this. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem at all. I mean, like I said, I'm a professional automation developer, and it physically pains me when I see the manual work that someone has to go through. So you're doing me a favor. We can avoid some of that manual stuff on your part now.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it looks super helpful. And even for implementing, I guess, designing for tests too, if you're building a card and kind of have an abstract idea how it's going to work, building out tests that, I guess,
that give you that,
design it so it will pass these tests makes a lot of sense too.
Precisely. That's actually something that I've been doing over on the Lord of the Rings side. We're introducing a new mechanic with a new keyword, and so I did exactly that. I don't have any cards at all that utilize this particular function or this particular mechanic yet, and so I was using that ad hoc functionality to staple them onto staple cards together to test that mechanic that exists nowhere except in Gemp. And so yeah, it's incredibly useful for new card development on top of just debugging, fixing card bugs and stuff like that.
Are there any good strategies for, I guess, avoiding collateral damage if there's an errata to a card that changes its functionality? The card's mechanics change, but it happens to be used in 36 tests for unrelated cards, and now those tests don't work. That sort of entanglement. Are there any good ways to navigate that?
I think by default you should probably, for that reason, stick to the cipher cards. Although, I mean, it's not very common for y'all's PC to issue a errata for decipher cards, right? So
correct. That'd be very rare.
Right. So, I mean, I guess my only advice there is try to
the
pick
most simple stuff as you can. Maybe.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and at least if the tests fail, we'll at least know which ones are failing, and we can then address them, and hopefully we'll figure out replace this card with that card, and then do that in all the tests, and then you've hopefully fixed most of the problems. But...
Yeah, just don't errata stormtroopers to the ability to
yeah.
or something.
Yeah, then we'll really be screwed, right? And in fact, that is one of the reasons why these tests are structured with everything at the front, because sometimes it turns out that a card changes, or that there was a caveat about that card that I didn't know. And in fact, I used a different version of Chewie initially when I did this. But it turned out that there was something about one of the ones that I'd selected that made him bad, and so I went in and just changed which particular version was being used, and boom, none of my tests had to be altered otherwise. So if that circumstance arises, it should be fairly straightforward to just go into that right here and just change which blueprint is being used. In theory, you wouldn't even have to change the name, even if it wasn't Chewie anymore, but now it was R2D2 or something. Although that would really probably should update it in that case. But
Yep.
Okay, well, if there's no other questions, I was hoping that the YouTube thing would be up later today, but I guess that won't be the case because of the crash. So I will have to download everything from Twitch and stitch them together and upload to YouTube, so that probably won't be until the end of this week or so. But
I think that's it. I have questions for you about just getting the system live. I know you have the pull requests in. I don't know if we should do it here, or I should just message you after.
It's up to you.
Just a couple questions about it.
In fact,
I'll shoot you a message.
let me wrap up the stream here. So let me just stop this.